All right, well, for those of you that may not have been here, my name is Darrin Dodds. I'm the cotton specialist in Mississippi State, and I'm not sure I can really tell you the title that I put in. I wondered, if I'd gotten a hold of some Xanax when I put that title in, because when I looked at it, I don't know what I was thinking when I did it. But anyway, I oftentimes have a lot of irrational thoughts for those of you that really know me. But anyway, I'm going to spend just a few minutes talking about some things that, that myself, and this I say me, but it's myself and a lot of the folks I work with, like Angus and Tucker and others, that maybe we can think about to try to save a little bit of money or put a little bit of money back onto that cotton budget to make it a little more attractive. When I think about things that are hard to control as far as cost goes, that's land and equipment. I wish I could control the price of land and equipment because I'd be pretty wealthy today. I'd probably be in the Caribbean on a boat, and I wouldn't be in Memphis. But if you just look at it from a land standpoint, if you look at it, purchase price versus rent price and all that other stuff, and this is some, take this data for what it's worth. It's some USDA data that I could find. But if you look at it where it was in 99, 06, and 13, you can see how it's just kind of climbed at a pretty linear rate, whether it's irrigated or non-irrigated, either one. Land rent's the same way. Land rent keeps going up and keeps going up. I hear complaints all the time about land rent. And I hear the complaints about land values. For those of you that know me, I grew up in Illinois. And there's some land. I grew up in west central Illinois. I didn't grow up over in the east side of the state where the soil is real dark and a lot of organic matter. I grew up in the west part of the state where the soil is more white and not nearly as productive soil. But there was some ground last year, the year before, my hometown sold for $10,000 an acre. And when my dad saw that, he almost stroked out, wondering how the guy's going to pay for that on corn, where it's at. I'm still not sure how the guy's going to do it. But where my in-laws live in northern Illinois, there's some land up there sold for $14,000 an acre this year up on I-80. It's just unbelievable. I'm not real sure how it's ever going to pay off. But that just kind of highlights where it's going with land values. If you look at equipment, just look at a picker, for example. If you look at just on a budget on how much per hour for a picker, a couple $100 and it went to $300. Now if you look at a 6-row module picker, you're looking at $400 to $500 an hour. But if you take all that and put it together and look where cotton prices have done, our cotton prices haven't really tracked where some of our other prices have went. And it's really, really, really made us try to figure out how to tighten our belt up and make cotton work, which, it's why we're not growing 1 million acres of cotton in Mississippi anymore. It's why we're growing, 300 to 600 or 700,000 acres, just depending on any given year. But, there are some things that we can do to help us make a little more money, in my opinion. These are just a few that I put on here, and Angus is in the room, Tucker's in the room. I'd encourage y'all make any comments y'all feel is necessary. But, doing what I do to a bunch of variety trials and a lot of agronomic kind of work, one of the first things I think of is variety selection. And everybody knows if you pick the wrong and you pay for it all year. But I'm not sure if you ever really think about it in terms of how much it may actually cost you to pick the wrong variety. So what I did, and Tucker helps us, and some of you in the room we've done these with, we do a lot of on-farm variety work. We do a lot of it. Greg, you cooperate with us, a lot of folks, the phytogen guys, we do a lot of stuff on this. This is the on-farm variety results from 2015 average over all 17 locations we had. This is Delta, Hills, this is everywhere. And so you can see, and I'm not even worried about the actual varieties. What I'm looking at is the yields. You can see our top yield one, which was, if you look at a statistical basis, was better than all the others, 1,300 pounds. Our mids were about 1,200 pounds. Our lowest is about 1,127. So if you take those and you figure 65-cent cotton and $250 a ton for seed, and you figure on those yields at those prices, that highest yield variety is about $1,150 an acre gross. Our mid's 1,035. Our lowest is 962. So if you pick the lowest one off that list versus the highest one off that list, you potentially just cost yourself $186 an acre. Commodity markets we're in today, I'll take $186 an acre straight profit and be pretty happy about it, to be honest with you. But if you even pick the mid-yielding variety, you still made or potentially cost yourself, depending on how you look at it, $73 an acre. And that's strictly in variety selection is all that is. And I know, we got more, and I've said this for the last 3 or 4 years, we've got more choices of good varieties in cotton than we've ever had, and I firmly believe that. But even having said that, there's still a core group of about 4 to 6 that probably go on 70% of our acres. So most of the time, the varieties that we need to be planting, we are planting it. But what I would encourage folks in this room to think about varieties is think about putting the right variety in the right spot. And what I mean by that is, and this is just the one that comes, I think about like a Delta Pine 1034, Greg. 1034 is a stone pony for us in the hills. Well, you put it up in the hills, non-irrigated, some tougher land, does really well. You put in the Delta, we're going to water on some really good cotton land. There's other varieties going to respond better on that land. It's not the best choice in that situation. That's the point that I'm making with that. Put the right variety in the right place is my point. And there's enough, there's enough variety data out there between what the university does, what the companies do, what y'all's dealers are doing, what y'all are doing. There's enough information out there. You ought to be able to get it fairly close about soil texture and irrigation and peat. We can get them pretty close. I still think we lack a little of that information, but you can get it pretty close where we need to be putting these things at, especially with respect to irrigated versus dry land. It's hard to read. I put that on there to cover a point. That's one of our budgets that we use. That's a university budget. If you look at that, there's not a whole lot of things in there you can change, but there are a few, varieties being one, fertility being one, and a few others. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Tucker and Trent's a little north of where you guys live at. This was not 2015. This was about the end of September 2014. You guys, I think, have seen this picture. So I got a call to come look at this field, and when I first got to the field, of course, I went way back over here with the guy I was with, and he's asked me why the leaves are falling off this cotton. I was walking around. I'll be honest, I was feeling pretty stupid at the time because the leaves are falling off your cotton. It's the end of the year. I didn't really know what to say. And I'm telling you the truth. Look, maybe some of y'all are smarter than me, but I don't know. That was the thought going through my head, is I'm going to make something up to kind of make this sound good so he doesn't think I'm a total idiot. But anyway, but he makes a comment. He said, well, look, there's 12 rows way another side that are perfectly green. And well, the way my mind works, all right, take me over there. I want to see that. So I went over there, and if you look, there's 12 rows right there that are perfectly green. They're about 300 feet long. And my first question was, what happened different right there? There's something different happened in that spot. And he said, well, last year their planter stopped up and they didn't plant them 12 rows to that 300 feet. And they fixed it and took off. So I got to looking. If you look at the potash levels in that field where it's bad, you're running in our test, you're 184 pounds, you're in the low category. Look at where it's good, you're 276 pounds, you're at least in the medium category. That's the difference in 1 year in fertility of what that crop took off. Now, it's a little bit of conjecture whether the guy was actually fertilizing or not. Some folks have told me he was. Some folks told me he wasn't. My gut feeling is he wasn't, given that he missed that year and in 1 year's time pulled enough potash out in that seed and everything else that he run it over the edge. My point saying all that is, I know prices are down. I know fertility is expensive. But if you, at the very least, I would encourage you to put out a maintenance application of fertilizer on your land, because that's not an investment for this year in and of itself. That's an investment for 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. It's easy to say, look, I'm not going to spend any money on fertility this year, but you're going to pay for that in a couple of years. Just think about that. The other thing, when I looked at that, looking at pH number of 5.6, I can assure you his root growth was restricted at 5.6 in that land. Anything below 5.8 scares me. Don't forget about lime. There's been a lot of times I've walked into fields and seen whacked out roots, and I ask them about lime, and I do it whenever. Look at lime. pH is one of the most important things y'all can be looking at with that. All right, Angus is in the room. This was a big collaborative effort between a lot of us. Tucker mentioned our number one issue in terms of insects or plant bugs, probably one of our biggest issues in general, that and resistant weeds. Yes, and everybody, you tell a guy, and Tucker, I know we had some guys north of y'all spray 10 times, 12 times this year for plant bugs, not real far outside of Clarksdale. Just got pounded by plant bugs. And again, that's one of the reasons we're not growing as much cotton. So there's a need out there to figure out what we can do to try to minimize, if you will, some of these plant bug populations. So I had a graduate student doing some other work in Stoneville, and we just happened to pick Stoneville 5288 to plant, and that's what we had. That's what we decided to go with. We went out there and started sampling it, looking for plant bugs, and found that there were not as many plant bugs in that 5288 as there was in the cotton right across the road. That was, I remember what variety it was. It was not a Velvet Elvis variety like 5288 is. If y'all grown 5288, you know what I'm talking about. That joker's hairy. So it kind of got us to thinking a little bit, what is the role of pubescence on these things in terms of plant bug response? So Angus and his guys kind of took this and ran with it. And so if you look at that picture on the left, that's 5288 that was not sprayed for plant bugs. That's 1050 that was sprayed, or that was not sprayed for plant bugs. That is strictly the effect of pubescence. You can see that picture right there. Now I fully understand on the back end, the hairy variety's got issues in the ginning industry, but it kind of I guess gets to be an economic thing. What is the value on the how good your gin's cleaning that lint versus how much you're going to spend on plant bugs? And I don't know if I fully know the answer for that. But I can tell you on the plant bug part of it, it looks like it's a big benefit in some of this pubescence type thing. So the other thing, and again, this is one of Angus's guys, started looking at planting dates. And we always try to plant as early as we can. The last 2 or 3 years have been pretty tough. It's been more of a May crop versus a mid to late April crop just because of what the weather's done for us. But if you get to looking at planting dates with an early maturing variety and a late maturing variety, it becomes clear pretty quickly that if you plant an early variety early, you start saving yourself start making yourself money in terms of plant bugs and minimizing the impact of those plant bugs on there. You kind of see how that tends to increase as you move into late May. A late variety in late May, we're costing ourselves 56% in terms of yield just because of plant bugs. Tucker mentioned this is diamond, and I think Angus would tell you, I'm not an entomologist, and I slept here not at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but when diamond first came out, I think they were trying to figure out really how to use it and where it fit, and finally those guys did a lot of work and figure out, especially early, it almost looks like the earlier you get it out, the better the diamond's going to work for you. Get it out 3rd week of square versus first bloom versus almost peak bloom. The earlier you get it out, you break that cycle up, try to minimize those populations. The diamond is helping on this. So think about where we're at. We're talking about a hairy variety. We're planting it early. We're using diamond. This is one of my guys. This is the trial where we had 5288, and we wanted to look at what nitrogen rates did on plant bugs. The thought behind that was if we overdo it on nitrogen and make a big old rank, lush cotton plant, what does a plant bug like? It wants a big old rank, lush, juicy looking cotton plant to flock in there and feed on all day long. So we went over Stoneville and Plant Bug Central and looked at a bunch of different nitrogen rates. Lo and behold, our number one, our yields were top. This is silt loam soil. Let me preface it by saying that this is not a clay soil by any means. This is some silt loam soil. We topped our yields out at 80 pounds. And Tucker, me and you talked about this morning. I'll talk about that in a second. We topped them out at 80 pounds. But not only do we top our yields out at 80 pounds, we cut back a couple of shots on plant bugs because those plants weren't as big and rank and lush and as attractive to them. So a couple years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we first started talking about this, and Tuck, there's a lot of pushback. Everybody's used to 120 pounds in the Delta. We want 120 pounds. We can't do without it. I wish he was here because I'd talk to Bruce today because he jumped on my back. I still got claw marks on my back from Bruce Pittman. I think he dug his toenails into it even, but that's a different story. Y'all know me, I don't take life real seriously. But so we're starting to do this. I know I've talked to some of the growers I work with that were 120, 130 pound guys and went back to 80. I talked to Tucker this morning. You got some guys that went back to 80 to 90 pounds and we're maintaining those yields. Not only are you saving money on that nitrogen cost, you're potentially eliminating some shots for plant bugs. So that's, I guess, no question in my mind about it, putting money back into your pocket.
Before you move on,
yes,
I saw your talk, when you did ACP this last year. I cut all my nitrogen back to 90 units.
How did it work?
A lot of 3-bale cotton.
Yeah.
I had conventional cotton made 1,503 pounds. I had one of the best cotton yields I've ever had at 90 units.
It's hard for me to complain on that.
I did it because of you, so thanks.
I'd rather you tell me that than you start throwing stuff at me and tell me it didn't work and I'm a moron, because that's happened before too. But so anyway, we put all that together. The early planting date, the early variety, cutting the nitrogen rates back, putting the diamond in there, put all that together into a best management practice kind of package. And Angus and his guys did this work. Do that in the Delta where we did the BMPs. We sprayed it 3 times for plant bugs, and they were in there sweeping it, spraying them on thresholds, versus 6 times where we didn't do it. Move over to the hills. We actually sprayed it 2 more times in the hills, but keep in mind, one of those was an automatic diamond shot at Pinhead Square, or whatever you want to call it, where we were sweeping, and we only did it 1 time. Look at what, of course, you spray more, you spend more to do that, but look at your lint yields. Where we did the BMPs, we were well above in terms of yield. We did the BMPs, we were above in terms of yield. Look at gross income, but look at where we're at net-wise. We're making more money by putting all those things together into a complete package. Now, am I going to tell you if you do a lot today, it's going to cut your plant bug shops from 7 to 2 or 3? No. But if it cuts it back by 2, you put money back in your pocket, is my point being. In the 65-cent cotton market, we got to do anything we can to try to get money in y'all's pockets to kind of keep this thing going if we want to keep growing cotton. Another area is irrigation. I know, Trent, you're doing some irrigation stuff, and there's a lot of folks doing this. These are some folks we've worked with for several years now, and historically they tended to over-irrigate their cotton. They love to pour some water down them cotton rows. And so we went in, we put some moisture sensors in. Lyle Pringle helped with this. There's several folks that did that. But basically, we broke this thing out into 4 blocks, watered 3 times starting early, 3 times starting a little bit later. watered 2 times starting right after July the 4th, and watered twice starting 5 days after that. If you had to guess which one of those blocks is going to pick, if I yielded that out, it's going to pick the most cotton.
The 2 irrigation.
Tucker, you've seen this before, you cheat. The one we watered the latest and watered twice outpicked everything else. I was standing there, I was weighing the round bales when the guy did this, and I wrote all the numbers and I gave them to him, and he just kind of scratched it. He was in utter disbelief. But what that tells me was he was pulling the trigger a little too early and restricting some of that plant growth early, and then he was watering it, in and amongst intermittent rainfalls, he was watering a little too much. He was just restricting growth of that plant. Now, I'm not telling you to wait till July the 10th to water by any means. If you want a water recommendation from me right now, taking rainfall out of the equation, I want to go into first bloom with a full complement of water in that soil profile. And I want to cut off about first crack, both now a little bit before, and I've got some data to look at that. But today, at least as I know it in cotton, that's where I want to be. The other thing I'll tell you in cotton, just like I'm built differently than Tucker, we're built differently than Angus, cotton varieties are built differently too. Some like water in different ways, if you will. And Jason Kreutz and his guys are looking at some irrigation stuff. Some of it is more of a bell-shaped curve, the way they like it, versus some like it more, I guess, be more aggressive in terms of irrigation. Cotton varieties are built differently, but are we prepared to tell you today how to water a specific variety? Will we get there in the next so many years? We might, but I think there's some other fundamental questions we got to answer in terms of irrigation before we get there. One of them being soil moisture sensors. There's a lot of folks getting in this, a lot of folks doing this. Somebody mentioned I think they're absolutely a tool. I think Bubba Simmons mentioned the talk before. So I think they're a tool. I think they're a great tool. But don't let those tools overrun your experience. Put your experience with them. Put them both together. That's what I can tell you is probably the best thing to do. All right, the other thing. When cotton acres first started going down and corn really started moving, there's a lot of folks, at least hardcore cotton folks, that didn't like the corn thing. I look at the corn thing as a benefit for cotton personally. If you look at where a corn-cotton rotation is, I'm not going to say every year, but more years than not, you're going to see a yield bump from growing corn with cotton. The 2 years, and this is some of Wayne Ebelhair's data out of Stoneville, the 2 years they did in 04 and 07, 1 year was really, really wet, if I recall. 1 year is really, really dry, if I recall. It's a weather phenomenon. But year in, year out, not uncommon to see 10, 15% yield bump from growing cotton in rotation with corn. Tucker and I talked about this a few minutes ago. If you got a guy growing peanuts, even better. Peanuts and cotton rotate really well. The one thing I'll caution you on peanuts, and not a lot of folks do, but if you're taking them vines off for hay, you better get the potash truck ready, is all I can tell you. There is a tremendous amount of potash tied up in peanut vines. I mean, a lot of it. In fact, if you run the numbers on, in my opinion, it's not worth what you're getting for the hay for what you have to pay the potash to replace it. I'd rather leave the vines out there and not have to put as much potash out if I had my druthers. So closing thoughts. Thrips, they've been an issue. They kind of seem to ebb and flow a little bit. Tucker mentioned this. Y'all know the problems with thiamethoxam, but even if you got cottonseed with imidacloprid on it, watch it. Don't think because it's got imidacloprid it's bulletproof, because we've seen some slippage in that. Watch it. As far as traits go, this whole pigweed thing has really changed the way we do things in cotton tremendously. I don't know. We're sitting here middle of January already. Are we going to have dicamba or 2,4-D? I can't tell you that. I'd like to tell you we would, but I don't know if we're going to or we're not. What I can tell you is the number of new pesticides, or I guess modes of action or even products coming, is pretty minimal. I've seen, I've been doing this between graduate school and work in a pretty good little while now, and I can count on the number, on one hand, the number of new products or modes of action I've seen. Actually, new mode of action has been, close to 30 years, Greg? Some of the bleaching chemistry, been a long time. It's easy for me to sit here and say, oh man, just come up with a new mode of action. Well, you think about what they got to do with that. It's got to kill the weeds and not kill the crop you're wanting to grow it in. It's got to not kill everything around it from a tox standpoint. I mean, you're looking at that with Transform. Transform is one of the safer materials we've seen. It's getting pulled because of various other issues. But it's a very lengthy, very expensive process to get a new mode of action, and the likelihood of seeing one in the foreseeable future, I hope we do, but I'm not optimistic it's going to happen. The other thing that interests me, and this is just me, is 30-inch cotton. If I'm thinking about this thing and I'm growing grains and cotton both, I'd at least consider 30-inch cotton, because the only thing you have to grow that crop is a picker. And if all I got to have is a picker, it makes cotton a little more attractive to me. Now, the thing I always get, we're growing cotton on beds. It's hard to get a 30-inch bed. I understand it's tough. It's tough to get a tall 30-inch bed. But we got some folks that do it, and we got some folks that do it very, very successfully, honestly. But I would at least consider that, just to minimize your spending on equipment. The last thing, don't spend money frivolously. You know, it's easy when 3 or 4 years ago when cotton was $1 and beans were, you know, $12, $14, $15, and beans or corn was $7 or $8. Just kind of spray some stuff and hope it's going to work. But if it don't, we're still making money. In a 65-cent cotton market, unless I know, and I mean unless I absolutely know something's going to pay the bills for me, I'm probably not going to do that. You know, the foliar fertilizers, things like that. Don't ever let those supplant a good, sound soil fertility program. In my opinion, save your money, spend it where you know it's going to pay you back, and you got to be willing to adapt. You know, we were willing to adapt when we changed our cotton acres out to some grain, but be willing to adapt on what you do from a pest management standpoint, from what you do from a variety selection standpoint. But those that are willing to adapt and are willing to kind of change some things, cotton does and always will have a place for us. It just kind of fits what we do. I just kind of hope our markets get a little bit more attractive to help us do that. With that, I don't even know where we're at on time, but that kind of wraps up what I've got. It is, well, I'll tell you, but my phone's died. It's 3:06, and we're supposed to be done at 3. We've got 5 minutes. Look at that. Any questions? Tucker, I'll let you answer them.
All right, I don't know. That's my answer.
Tucker, you're the smartest guy I know. Well, look, I appreciate y'all being here. Angus and I talk about this all the time. This is one of the favorite meetings we do because it's not a bunch of university guys talking to university guys. We get to talk to a bunch of different folks. So CCA sheets are in the back. If y'all need something, there's my contact info. I'm sure Tucker will be glad to help you. But if not, have a good rest of the day, and we'll see you this evening or tomorrow.